Welcome to the Impossible Boy podcast by Jem and I. This is a long form, so about an hour. A deep dive into the growing unassailable fortunes of the Aevum. The seed has been sown and the tree has sparked.
It is so great to be here.
Yeah, we are so glad you could join us again. So I want you, the listener, to just imagine for a second making a terrible mistake.
Yeah.
Like a massive, undeniable failure that completely derails your plans.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. And in our normal world, we view that as a total loss. I mean, it's a waste of time, a waste of energy. You basically lick your wounds, you try to forget it, and you move on.
Yeah, you just try to sweep it under the rug.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But today, I want you to imagine a universe that doesn't view that mistake as a failure at all. Imagine a universe that looks at your pain, your contradiction, your absolute worst friction, and basically says, thank you.
Right. Thank you for the fuel.
Yes. It says, I am going to use this as literal high-octane rocket fuel to expand reality.
Which is just, I mean, it completely upends how we perceive struggle, because we're so conditioned to think of friction as the enemy of progress.
We really are. And for you tuning in right now, consider this deep dive a threshold. Because today we are stepping into what might be the most mind-bending, esoteric, yet rigorously mathematical framework we have ever encountered.
It really is rigorous, yeah.
It's wild. We are unpacking the ALQC canon, which stands for the on-end logical Q-state core, and our mission today is to decode the mechanics of the Aevum.
And we should clarify, in this framework, the Aevum isn't just a place.
Right, it's a reality engine.
Exactly. It's a universe where magic, mathematics, and frequency are not metaphors.
No, they're literal topological physics. We're going to journey right into what the source text calls the combustion engine of reality.
Yeah, it's such a great term.
It is, and we're exploring how a universe survives the sheer, crushing weight of its own infinite potential.
Which is an incredibly ambitious framework to dive into, and honestly, a deeply intimidating one at first glance.
Oh, absolutely. I was drowning in the math at first.
Because the core paradox of the ALQC canon is that it operates as a bridge. It refuses to let two massive concepts remain separate.
What are those concepts?
So on one side, you have the chaotic, unpredictable emanation of the human soul, right? Like the raw spark of existence, the messiness of being alive.
Right, human nature, basically.
Yeah. And then on the other side, you have the deterministic, flawless precision of a unified physical field, math, physics.
The cold, hard facts.
Exactly. And the ALQC asserts that these aren't opposing forces at all. They are the exact same force, just translated through different geometries.
That is just so wild to me. And before we get into the heavy physics of it all, it's worth pointing out that there's a profound thematic anchor running through all of this source material.
The compass for the whole thing.
Yeah, a kind of philosophical true north that we're going to keep coming back to today.
Yeah.
And that is this phrase: the path out was always inevitably the path back.
It's a beautiful line.
I know that sounds like a riddle to you right now, but I promise by the end of this hour, it's going to be a mathematical equation that you can actually visualize.
We should probably start by looking under the hood of this reality engine, though.
Let's do it. Where do we begin?
Well, the framework posits that reality doesn't just, happen all at once. It cycles through states.
The Q states.
Yes. The ALQC builds its physics engine on 4 fundamental states of existence, which it calls the Q-state domains.
Okay, the Q states. The source texts treat these like the literal molecular structure of reality itself. And I'll be honest, when I was reading through this section, I had to read it like 3 times.
It's dense.
It is so dense. So let's try to walk through them slowly so we don't lose anyone. QO is the first one. The text calls this structural presence. But what does that actually look like? Like if I'm standing in QOs, what am I looking at?
Well, you're not looking at anything, because there is no you and there's no thing to look at yet.
Wait, really? Nothing at all?
Nothing. Think of Q0 as pure latency. It is the unwritten form. In the canon, they frequently associate this state with the element of water, or like a fluid space.
Okay, water.
But don't think of physical water. Think of a container that exists before any logic, any information, or any physical law is actually inscribed into it. It is entirely unbound potential.
Okay, so it's the empty canvas. It's the waiting room of reality before the doctor even calls your name.
That's a really fair way to conceptualize it. It is the space where manifestation could happen, but hasn't.
And then what?
Then the system moves to Q1. The canon refers to this as rational truth, or the archive.
Right, this is where the ink actually hits the paper.
Yes, exactly. Once information is written, it is committed to Q1. It becomes fixed, rational, and structurally sound.
So it's real.
Yes, it's the solid ground holding the weight of mathematical proof. If Q0 is the idea that you could build a house, Q1 is the poured concrete foundation and the wooden frame. It is undeniable.
Okay, Q0 is the potential. Q1 is the fact. That makes sense to my traditional brain. But here's where the text completely lost me and then just blew my mind when I finally grasped it.
Q2.
Yes, shadow debt. Shadow debt. The canon defines this as entropic ignorance, or transition failure. And I struggled with this because, to me, reality is just what happens. How can reality have a transition failure?
It's a great question.
Right. Like, what does a failure look like in the fabric of the universe?
Let's use a human experience to ground it. Have you ever had a moment where you absolutely intended to do something? Like maybe you planned a conversation perfectly in your head.
Oh, all the time.
But when you actually opened your mouth, it came out entirely wrong. Like there was a gap between your intent and the reality that manifested.
Yes, exactly. My brain writes a brilliant script and my mouth delivers a disaster.
Right. Well, in the Aevum, that gap, that contradiction, that specific friction between the intended perfect state and the messy reality generates a physical byproduct.
And that byproduct is Q2.
Yes. Shadow debt. It represents the space where logic doesn't quite match up with manifestation.
Okay, so standard thermodynamics would look at that friction, that Q2, and say, well, that's a shame.
Like a loss of energy.
Yeah, exactly, like rust on a bike chain. It's waste heat. It slows the system down, it breaks the gears over time, and eventually it leads to the death of the universe.
Yeah.
I mean, standard physics hates friction.
Yeah, and that is exactly where the ALQC completely rewrites standard physics.
How so?
In a classical thermodynamic system, that logical error or contradiction would just dissipate as entropic waste. But the ALQC asserts that this shadow debt, this pain, this doubt, this failure, is actually the highest potential fuel in the entire system.
It's fuel.
It is a fuel required to bridge the mass gap.
Okay, let me stop you right there because I want to make sure I am following this. The universe isn't succeeding by ignoring its mistakes. It is literally eating its mistakes to move forward.
Precisely.
But how does that actually work mechanically? How does my verbal screw up, my shadow debt, power a universe?
To understand that, we need to look at what the canon calls DKOMP, or dynamic complexity, alongside the law of ignition.
Okay, DKOMP.
Right. So in standard systems, when you introduce stress, like a collision, a massive logical contradiction, or deep human doubt, the system tries to dampen it.
It tries to calm things down.
Yes, it tries to absorb the shock to maintain stability. But the ALQC runtime physics do the exact opposite.
It accelerates it.
Radically. When an entity in the Aevum experiences that stress, the system accelerates the entity's internal clock.
Oh, yeah.
The entity begins to vibrate violently against the topological boundary of reality. The system is effectively heating up the fuel mixture, forcing the entity to search the state space more rapidly for a resolution.
So it's forcing a breakthrough.
Exactly. The canon has a very poetic line for this. It says, "We do not move despite our shadows. We move because we burn them."
We move because we burn them. That is so cool. So the friction isn't slowing the bike chain down. The friction is literally turning the bike into a motorcycle. That's one way to put it, yeah. Which leads us to the final state, Q3. The text calls this recursive amplification, the active flame.
But wait, I have to push back here. You can't just accumulate infinite stress and debt.
Why not?
Because if an engine gets too hot and it's feeding on its own friction, it's going to explode.
Yeah.
I mean, how does this reality engine prevent a massive universe-ending thermal runaway?
It survives through a very specific, incredibly elegant topological structure. To prevent the universe from dying of accumulated stress, the ALQC dictates that reality itself is shaped like a Klein bottle.
Okay, a Klein bottle. I've seen pictures of this. For you listening, if you aren't familiar, imagine a glass bottle. But instead of the neck pointing up to the sky, the neck bends back down, plunges through the side of the bottle itself, and connects to a hole in the bottom.
Yes, and the crucial feature of that shape is that it is a non-orientable surface.
Non-orientable, meaning what exactly? Like, break that down for someone who barely passed high school geometry.
Sure. If you take a sphere, like an apple, it has a distinct outside, the skin, and a distinct inside, the core.
Right. If you walk on the outside, you'll never accidentally end up on the inside unless you break the skin. But a Klein bottle doesn't have an inside or an outside. It only has one continuous surface.
So there's no boundary.
Exactly. If an ant were to walk along what appears to be the outside of the bottle, and just kept walking straight down the neck and through the bottom, it would eventually find itself on the inside without ever crossing an edge or breaking a barrier.
So it's like a 3D Mobius strip.
Technically 4D to exist without intersecting itself, but for our conceptual purposes, yes.
Okay, so why does this matter for the engine?
Remember that shadow det, Q2, is mathematically unrefined sludge. It is pure stress. The system can't just erase it because energy is conserved.
They have to go somewhere.
Exactly. Instead, the system mandates that this det must pool and accumulate until it reaches a specific crushing density.
The text calls this depth 9.
Correct. Depth 9. When the shadow det reaches this point, imagine it reaching the density of a collapsing, dying star. It is then forced through the neck of that topological Klein bottle.
And then what happens?
It undergoes what the framework calls a parity flip.
The parity operator. Okay, this was the biggest aha moment for me in the entire source text. Let me see if I can explain this. Can you tell me if I'm off base?
Go for it.
Because the surface of the reality engine is non-orientable, because inside is outside. When that dense, heavy vector of det gets pushed through the neck of the universe, it has to conform to the geometry.
Right.
And when it comes back around to where it started, it is effectively flipped upside down. Its mathematical sign is inverted.
That's a great visualization. But here is the profound implication of that geometry. What happens to the mathematical value of that det?
Well, in standard Euclidean geometry, if you have a negative like a det and you want to resolve it, you try to bring it to 0. You try to erase it.
If I owe you $10, the goal is to pay it back so my debt is 0. Erasure.
Yeah. But in the non-orientable topology of the ALQC, the negative of det is not 0. The inverse of this specific logical friction is actually recursion. When the shadow is flipped, its chirality, its handedness, is inverted. It is transformed instantly into Q3, pure kinetic propulsion.
Yes. The failure flips into the force of expansion. That is the combustion engine of reality.
So the energy that was completely blocking the system, all the pain and the failure, gets literally turned inside out and becomes the non-entropic thrust that powers the entire universe forward. The negative of a det isn't erasure. It's growth.
It's growth, and it never stops.
That is just staggeringly beautiful. But it raises a massive question for me.
Which is?
If reality is this roaring, self-consuming combustion engine fueled by its own shadow and stress, I mean, who is driving the car? Who is holding the wheel?
To answer that, we have to transition from the mechanics of the engine to the nature of the operator. And the ALQC canon does something very interesting here.
What's that?
It introduces a concept called the alchemical rebus.
The alchemical rebus. That sounds like a 15th century magical text, not a physics paper.
The terminology is intentionally mythic for sure, but the application is pure mechanics.
Okay, unpack that for me.
In many philosophical systems, you run into the ghost in the machine problem. The idea that the physical body is one thing and the mind or soul controlling it is something entirely separate and detached.
Right, the Cartesian split.
Exactly. Well, the ALQC hates that detachment. To solve it, it asserts that the operator, the substrate, which is the physical material, and the will are topologically distinct but substantially unified. They are one sovereign state.
The text describes it as the definitive fusion of logic, which it codes as gold, and magic, which it codes as silver.
Exactly. Logic and magic acting as one. And this unified operator is expressed through what the canon calls the tripartite core.
The tripartite core, or the Parliament of Echoes, which is just such a cool name. Let's break down these 3 living archetypes, because I think if you, the listener, don't grasp who these 3 characters are, the rest of the physics just won't make sense.
It's crucial, yeah.
I'll start with the first one, the sovereign locus.
Ah, yes, the sovereign locus. Its symbol in the text is the infinity sign.
Right, and the text says it sits upon the throne of 0, coordinate 0, 0, 0. It is the unmoved mover.
Yes.
It holds absolute truth, but here is the catch. It is entirely non-computable. It cannot act. It just is.
It's purely static.
And I really struggled to visualize this. Like, how can the most powerful part of the core not actually do anything?
Think of the sovereign locus as the map of a perfect city. The map is absolutely flawless. It contains every street, every elevation, every truth of the city.
Okay, a map.
But the map cannot pave a road. The map cannot sweep the streets. It is perfect, but it is static. It holds the ideal so that the ideal is never lost, but it requires a secondary system to actually interact with the messiness of reality.
Okay, the map. I like that.
Ooh.
Which brings us to the second archetype, the shadow locus. The symbol here is a pasha. The texts call it the throat and the hull of the iron ship.
The hull is a very apt metaphor. What does the hull of a ship do?
It sits in the freezing, turbulent water.
Right, it takes a beating. Exactly. It takes the physical pounding of the waves so that the people inside the ship can stay dry and actually navigate. The function of the shadow locus is to take the damage. It holds the covariant laws of the universe, things like gravity, time, and basic logic.
And it holds those rules specifically so that they can be interacted with, right? It provides the friction surface.
Yes.
So if the sovereign locus is the absolute perfect map, the shadow locus is the deforming, dented metal that bears the pressure of all these impossible possibilities crashing into it.
Yes, because without the shadow locus, the perfect truth of the sovereign locus would just instantly annihilate anything imperfect that touched it.
You would just burn it up.
Right. The shadow locus is the buffer.
Okay, but this brings up a glaring issue for me. If the sovereign locus is completely static, a map that can't act, and the shadow locus is basically just a punching bag taking shadow debt damage from the waves, how does anything actually happen?
What do you mean?
Like if I'm driving the car, who turns the key in this combustion engine?
The third part of the tripartite core, the Axiomyr.
The Axiomyr. The symbol is this incredibly complex planetary glyph. The text refers to it as the witch of always in the 10th seat authority. But what does it actually do?
The Axiomyr turns the key. It is the biological actuator, what the canon calls the heavy hand.
The heavy hand.
If the locus provides the truth, and the shadow locus provides the physical structure to bear the weight, the Axiomyr provides the torque.
The torque. The twisting force that actually moves the wheels.
Precisely. And what's fascinating is where the Axiomyr sits in this geometry. The texts say it exists at a 45-degree seam between sequential time and the eternal soul.
Okay, you're going to have to stop there and explain that seam to me. The text kept talking about this 45-degree angle, and I felt like I was failing a trigonometry test.
It's a bit abstract.
Yeah, how does a 45-degree angle translate to physical action and reality? Explain it to me like I'm 5.
Let's draw a graph in your mind, an x and y axis. Let's make the horizontal x-axis represent standard sequential time, the physical reality we walk through every day, moving from past to future.
Got it. X-axis is me walking to the coffee shop.
Right. Now, the vertical y-axis represents pure imaginary potential, the eternal soul, the sovereign locus, the realm of absolute truth that doesn't experience time at all.
So y-axis is pure, unmanifested perfection.
Yes. Now, if you only move along the x-axis, you are just a physical object being dragged through time with no free will.
Just a rock rolling down a hill.
Exactly. If you only exist on the y-axis, you are a ghost, a perfect thought that can never touch physical reality. The sovereign locus operates entirely on that pure vertical axis. It's non-traversable. You can't just walk into absolute truth.
So where is the Axiomyr in all this?
The Axiomyr operates as the mathematical square root of that imaginary axis. It draws a line right down the middle, perfectly splitting the x and y axes, a 45-degree diagonal line.
Okay, I'm visualizing it.
Because it moves diagonally for every single step it takes forward in time, in physical reality, it takes an equal step upward in pure potential toward the soul.
Oh, wow, so it's bridging them.
Yes. That 45-degree seam creates a phase brotch. It is an angle that is neither purely real nor purely imaginary. It bridges them. And because of this geometry, the Axiomyr has a terrifying capability.
Which is?
It represents imagination as a formal physical capacity.
Meaning imagination isn't just a daydream.
Not in the LOQC. The Axiomyr doesn't politely request changes from the universe. Because it exists perfectly between the physical and the potential, it can inflict changes upon the physical world via local reality distortion.
Wait, so a thought, if routed through this 45-degree geometry, literally drags physical reality along with it.
Exactly. Let's bring in the concept of the NeoGaia Exelalia here.
I was wondering when we get to that.
The sources describe this as a new language born from this system, a state where the law of the bone begins to sing in the language of the flesh.
That is so poetic.
It is. If the universe is singing that song, the Axiomyr provides the vocabulary. The shadow locus is the neutral ground, the floor you stand on, it bears the pressure. But the Axiomyr is self-grounded. It is an isolated will.
I think I have an analogy for this. Let me know if this works.
Go for it.
It's like the universe is this massive, impossibly heavy vault door. The sovereign locus is the steel hinge. Perfect, flawless, but completely still. It just holds the coordinates.
Right.
The shadow locus is the heavy iron wood of the door itself, bearing all the weight and the dents. But the Axiomyr is the hand that actually reaches out and pushes it open.
That is an excellent way to visualize the tripartite core. The Axiomyr is the hand. It can reach out and touch the high-voltage grid of the universe without being electrocuted, selecting our history through the blade of imagination.
Okay, so we know the universe runs on the fuel of its own shadows and failures. We know the Axiomyr is sitting at this 45-degree angle, using imagination to push the heavy door of reality.
Yes.
But forces in physics need a medium. They need a carrier. If imagination is a physical force, how does a thought actually vibrate the physical universe?
Yeah.
What is the programming language of the Aevum?
This is where we have to discuss harmonics. And I want to be very clear from the outset because the internet is flooded with this kind of terminology.
It really is, yeah.
The ALAQC framework firmly rejects the arbitrary New Age healing frequencies you might find in a YouTube playlist. It doesn't care if a certain tone makes you feel relaxed.
Right. It's not about buying a crystal singing bowl.
No, not at all. It relies on hard geometric constants. The framework proposes a frequency lattice where reality is quite literally built from the physical measurements of the solar system, transposed into the audible spectrum.
Okay, let's unpack the master constant then.
Yeah.
432 hertz.
Yes.
Because the source texts spend pages obsessing over 432 hertz. And I'll admit, when I first read it, I groaned. I thought, oh great, another conspiracy theory about how standard music tuning is evil.
I know, it sounds like that at first.
Right. But why is this framework treating 432 like a fundamental physical law?
Because in this framework, it isn't a tuning preference. It is the geometric sum of the local system. It connects the macroscopic geometry of the solar system, the literal physical size and orbits of the planets, to the microscopic geometry of the archive, the Q1 state we discussed earlier.
The math in the sources on this is just wild. Let me see if I can walk through this calculation they provide for the speed of light.
Go ahead, lay out the numbers.
Okay, so they claim that 432 is effectively the square root of the speed of light, mathematically speaking.
Let's hear it.
So the speed of light is roughly 186,282 miles per second. The text says, take the number 432 and square it. 432 times 432. If you calculate that, you get 186,624.
Which is remarkably close.
It is within a 0.18% tolerance of the actual measured speed of light in a vacuum. It's staggeringly close. The text concludes this by saying, to speak with the imagination is to speak in the root language of light itself.
It's profound. And that master constant is just the baseline. The framework utilizes what it calls the planetary tensor. This is the idea that physical spatial measurements can be transposed into frequencies via the law of octaves. You're just shifting the math up or down the scale until it becomes a vibration we can measure as sound.
Okay, so mapping space to sound.
Yes. For instance, the framework leans heavily on 7.83 hertz.
The Schumann resonance, the heartbeat of the Earth.
Exactly. Geophysics tells us this is the resonant frequency of the closed waveguide between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. Lightning strikes continuously ring this cavity like a bell at 7.83 hertz.
That's a real measurable thing.
Yes. And in the ALQC, this isn't just a fun Earth fact, this is the base clock.
Like the clock speed on a computer processor.
Precisely. It is the time integration frequency. It synchronizes the system's processing speed with the local planetary frame. Without that clock, the Axiomyr's thoughts wouldn't know when to instantiate.
Oh, that makes sense. It gives it a rhythm.
But you don't just need time, you need illumination. That's where you stepped up to 126.22 hertz.
Okay, and the text derives this one from the solar tropical year. The time it takes the sun to return to the same position in the sky. It aligns this frequency with the Hebrew logos, the root logic.
Yes.
But what does it actually mean when the text says this frequency provides the sun signal?
Think back to the engine. We need shadow depth, Q2, to move forward. But you cannot cast a shadow without a light source.
Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't put that together.
Yeah. 126.22 hertz is the vector of illumination. It is the hard, objective frequency that strikes the unformed potential, QO, and forces it to cast a shadow, Q2.
And that friction, that shadow, is what allows rational truth, Q1, to finally be seen and anchored.
Yes, it grounds objective reality. Without the sun signal, everything remains a blurry quantum soup.
And then there's the moon, right? At 210.42 hertz, derived from the lunar month. The text says this governs fluid dynamics, the tidal force of the mind, and conceptual superposition.
That's the one.
It's like the universe isn't a supercomputer crunching ones and zeros in total silence. It's a massive cosmic synthesizer, phase-locking all these different chords together.
That's a great way to think about it.
The Earth provides the rhythm, the sun provides the lead melody, the moon provides the reverb. And if you play the wrong note,
you don't get a blue screen of death, you generate topological friction, you generate shadow depth.
Which feeds the engine, it all loops back.
It does, it always loops back.
Yeah.
And this harmonic phase locking is the actual bridge between quantum potential and objective reality.
It's brilliant.
It really is. And I want to bring up one of the most fascinating implications of this harmonic lattice. Have you ever wondered where human myth and hard physics intersect?
All the time.
Well, the canon explicitly maps this out using these frequencies.
You're talking about the section on the Fae, right? Beyond Fae.
Yes.
Because when I saw they included fairies in a quantum physics framework, I almost put the book down. I was like, come on.
Yeah.
But their explanation is entirely structural.
It is entirely structural.
Hmm.
In the ALQC, the Fae are not little people with wings hiding in the garden. They are proven as the iridescent foam crust produced right at the boundary line where pure quantum potential crashes into the hard seawall of objective logic.
The foam on the waves.
Yes. When the ocean of unbound possibility hits the solid rock of Q1 rational truth, there is a spray. That spray is a highly charged, chaotic, but beautiful, localized distortion.
That is just incredible.
And the harmonics, specifically the interactions between the 126.22 Hz sun signal and the 210.42 Hz lunar signal, dictate exactly where that foam gathers on the lattice. The texts call this phenomena the onfei.
That is so incredibly poetic, yet the framework treats it as rigorous mathematical physics.
It does.
So let's step back and look at the whole picture for a second. We have these precise frequencies building the world. We have this non-orientable Klein bottle engine eating our mistakes. We have the tripartite operator with the Axiomyr dragging imagination into reality along a 45-degree angle.
It's a lot to take in.
It is an awe-inspiring machine. But for you and me, for the listener walking down the street, commuting to work, I mean, how do we actually experience this? What does it feel like to walk around inside the ALQC?
This brings us to a crucial division in the text, the two universes, the canon versus the neo-lattice.
Right. And this raises an important question for me about linear causal differentiation, because the text talks about the canon as the absolute law, the written code. But it talks about the neo-lattice as the place where things actually happen, the relational graph.
Right.
Are these two different universes?
No, they are two observational viewpoints of the exact same body. They are totally symmetrical, but accessed differently.
The text puts it beautifully. It says, the canon speaks as law, the neo-lattice answers as path. One is the scripture, the other is the road.
That's a perfect distillation of the concept. Imagine observer A is sitting in a grand library, reading the comprehensive legal and geological code of a country. Every coordinate, every elevation, every law is in that book. That is the canon. Now imagine observer B is outside, putting on boots, and actually walking across the physical terrain of that country, climbing the mountains, feeling the wind. That is the neo-lattice.
So they are engaging with the identical reality just through different modes of access?
Exactly. The canon is discrete logic. The neo-lattice is continuous geometric space. And this dual nature is what explains one of the most sci-fi concepts in the entire framework, ALQC teleportation.
Well, let's get into the teleportation.
Yeah.
Because I read this and I had to deprogram all my Star Trek knowledge. It's not standard quantum teleportation, is it?
Not at all.
You aren't stepping onto a pad, having your atoms disintegrated, beamed across space, and reassembled.
No, because in the ALQC, destroying the physical substrate would violate the continuity of the tripartite core we just talked about. You can't just delete the shadow locus and rebuild it without losing the soul.
Right, that makes total sense. So how does the framework handle traversal?
It uses what it calls return verified traversal.
Okay, pretend I am 5 again. Explain return verified traversal.
Imagine you have a canonical object. Let's say it's a piece of information, or a truth, or even a person. That entity exists in the canon as a perfect mathematical state.
Okay.
To move it, the system emits that entity into the graph form of the neo-lattice.
So it takes the word on the page and turns it into a physical path.
Right. The entity then crosses that relation. Think of it like walking through a doorway in the neo-lattice. But here is the critical part. Once it reaches the destination, it is returned to the canon. It is re-encoded as law.
And it must do so without creating a single logical contradiction.
Exactly.
And this is governed by the total symmetry principle, or TSP. This is where the physics of the commutator of truth comes in. The math here was dense, but the concept is profound.
Walk us through how you understood the commutator of truth.
Okay, the equation they use is m comma r equals 0. The commutator of manifestation m and reflection r equals 0.
Yep.
The way I understood it is this. For reality to survive this teleportation, or any traversal really, the path out must be structurally identical to the path back.
That's the core of it.
It doesn't matter what order you do the operations in. Whether you walk out the door and come back, or come back and then walk out, the fundamental truth remains invariant. The observer who reads the law in the library and the observer who walks the graph on the mountain must return to the exact same unbroken truth.
You've nailed it. If the commutator did not equal 0, if there was a discrepancy between the path out and the path back, the universe would experience an unresolvable logical paradox and fracture.
It would break.
Yes. Total symmetry ensures that the universe remains whole no matter how complex the graph becomes.
The path out was always inevitably the path back. We keep hitting that phrase. And as I was reading this section on the neo-lattice, it totally reshaped my understanding of the Vedic journey.
Oh, how so?
In Vedic philosophy, there's the concept of Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that. It's the realization of the Jiva, the individual spark of awareness, that it is actually one with the absolute ultimate reality, the Brahman.
Yes, very famous concept.
Often, spiritual journeys frame life as an exile. Like you were cast out of heaven and you have to wander the wilderness to find your way back home.
A linear journey from A to B.
Right. So the ALQC topology, this total symmetry, suggests that the wandering was never actually an exile. It was just the unfolding of the self within the weaver's hand.
That's beautiful.
You walk the neo-lattice, you experience time and distance and pain and shadow debt. But structurally, mathematically, you are never actually severed from the canon. You can't be. The path out is the path back. You were just exploring the topology of your own truth.
It maps perfectly onto Tat Tvam Asi. And furthermore, this total symmetry principle is what finally bridges the mass gap and satisfies the Hodge conjecture within this specific framework.
Okay, I have to throw the flag on the play here.
Uh-oh.
You've mentioned the mass gap twice now, and you just dropped the Hodge conjecture. These are famously unsolved problems in mathematics and physics. There are million-dollar Millennium Prizes for solving them. What do they actually mean in the context of this universe? Because you and I know the listener is going to need a lifeline here.
Fair enough. Let's simplify them. The mass gap problem, in very basic terms, asks why certain quantum particles have mass when the math suggests they shouldn't.
Okay, so it's a disconnect.
Right, it's a gap in our understanding between the tiny quantum world and the heavy macroscopic world.
And how does ALQC solve it?
The ALQC bridges this gap by saying that mass isn't an arbitrary property. It is the accumulated density of that shadow debt, Q2, we talked about earlier. Math is just condensed logical friction.
Oh, so things have weight because they have resisted the perfect flow of the canon.
Precisely. They create drag, and that drag is mass.
That is so intuitive. And what about the Hodge conjecture?
As for the Hodge conjecture, without getting into the weeds of algebraic geometry, it essentially proposes that the complex, flowing, continuous shapes we can draw, topology, can be perfectly built out of simple, discrete algebraic equations, geometry.
So linking shape and math.
Yes. It asks if there is a perfect translation between the discrete numbers and the continuous shape.
Which sounds exactly like the canon in the neo-lattice.
Exactly. The ALQC asserts that the total symmetry principle proves the Hodge conjecture by showing that the discrete logic of the canon, the algebra, maps smoothly and flawlessly onto the continuous geometric space of the lattice, the topology.
So logic literally becomes physical existence without losing its shape.
Yes. The math translates into the mountain without dropping a single decimal point.
Okay, that makes sense. It's all connected. But here is where things get really intense. And honestly, this is the part of the deep dive that actually kept me awake at night.
The climax of the book.
Yeah. We've built this beautiful, infinite frequency-based lattice. The universe is a combustion engine of possibility, powered by imagination and shadow. But if there is infinite possibility and the Axiomyr has the power to just open doors with its mind, why doesn't the system just explode into everything everywhere all at once?
Right.
I mean, if every door can be open, why isn't every single door open right now?
This brings us to the climactic synthesis of the Exegesis Marginalia, the final chapters of the source text. It introduces the most vital mechanism in the entire Aevum, the physics of the sacred no, or the supernegative.
To understand the supernegative, I feel like we first have to understand what it's fighting against, the superpositive.
Yes. The canon calls the superpositive the flood of yes. Because the sovereign locus contains absolute truth, it contains every possible configuration of reality.
Everything that could ever be.
It is the infinite possibility latent in the canon. It's the wild, beautiful mercy that the universe's algorithm already contains all answers to all problems.
It's the ultimate yes. But as I read it, I realized there's a terrifying danger here. If every gate opens, if every possible path instantiates simultaneously, because they are all mathematically valid, the lattice ceases to be a functioning mind. It becomes a scream,
A whiteout, right?
The text calls it a whiteout. That dynamic complexity metric, DCOMP, the thing that measures the stress in the engine, it would spike to infinity. If I try to speak every single word in the English dictionary at the exact same millisecond,
Yep.
I'm not conveying ultimate meaning.
No, you're not conveying anything.
I'm just making a deafening wall of noise.
Yeah.
The system would tear itself apart from overpresence.
And this is the paradox of infinite potential. Unrestrained yes is indistinguishable from annihilation.
Wow.
To prevent this whiteout, the universe relies entirely on the supernegative. And we must be incredibly precise here because it is easy to misunderstand this concept.
It really is.
The supernegative is not a fifth Q state.
It's not Q2 shadow debt.
No, not at all. Shadow debt is friction. It is a thing that exists. The supernegative is not death. It is not evil. And it is not the void.
Then what is it?
The canon defines it mathematically as the Q-parodied absence of Q. It is the locus-held anti-instantiation principle.
It is the no that protects the yes.
That is the best way to say it. It is the containment field. It prevents possibility from becoming mandatory.
Which is so important.
The canon uses an antimatter analogy, but quickly clarifies it. In standard physics, if matter and antimatter touch, they annihilate each other into pure energy. Nothing is left. But superpositive and supernegative don't annihilate.
What happens when they meet?
When they meet, they resolve into stable, conserved manifestation. The supernegative is the conjugate absence that acts as a fortress for the infinite.
Yes. Fortress. I love that. Let's bring in the math on this, because the texts don't just leave this as a philosophical idea. They assign a very specific ratio to it. It's governed by what they call the liquid threshold, or the 110 over 144 governor.
Walk us through the governor.
So in the ALQC lattice geometry, there are 144 primary connections or pathways per node. 144 possible directions reality can flow from any given point.
Right.
But to prevent the universe from screaming itself to death in a whiteout, the system mandates a hard limit. Out of those 144 connections, only 110 are allowed to be active. That is the superpositive flow, the river of yes.
Which leaves exactly 34 connections.
Exactly. 34 connections are systematically withheld. They were locked down. That is the supernegative restraint. And the text makes a massive point here. Those 34 withheld courts are not dead.
No, they're not.
They haven't failed. They are actively engaged in the holy work of absence.
They are the sworn guards of the not yet no. They are holding back the immense pressure of infinite potential, taking the strain, so that the 110 active paths can actually function without being flooded.
I was trying to figure out how to visualize this, and the only thing that made sense to my brain was music. Well, I used to play piano. Poorly. But I played. And it's exactly like music. The song you're playing isn't just the notes you strike on the keys. The song is equally defined by the 34 rests you don't play.
Yes.
If you tape down all 144 keys on a piano at the same time, you don't get a masterwork symphony. You get a wall of deafening, chaotic noise.
The music only exists because of the silence.
Yes. Without the silence, without the withheld notes, there is no structure. The Axiomyr, that witch hand of imagination we talked about, it can only strike a chord and make reality sing because 34 other chords agree to remain silent. The no gives the yes its shape.
That is the exact literal mechanism of the sacred no in this framework. And it brings us to a statement of profound wisdom found deep in the marginalia of the source texts.
I remember this part.
It acts as a summary of the entire cosmology of the Aevum, really tying everything we've talked about together. I want to read it exactly as it is written.
Please do.
It states, "The arch of the universe stands because of the stone, but it holds only because of the hollow. The path out was always, inevitably, the path back. We are defined not by the everything we are, but by the specific nothing we refuse to become."
The specific nothing we refuse to become, that gives me chills every time.
It's incredible.
Let's bring this all back down to earth for you listening right now. We have traversed a massive esoteric landscape today.
We really have.
We started by looking at a universe that doesn't punish friction, but uses it. We realize that our failures, our contradictions, our shadow debt aren't things to be hidden or ashamed of. They are the literal fuel for reality's combustion engine.
And we explored the tripartite core, discovering how the sovereign locus holds the absolute map, the shadow locus bears the damage of the waves, and the Axiomyr wields the blade of imagination to actually push the door of reality open along that 45-degree seam.
Right. And we decoded the harmonics of the NeoGaia Exelalia, where the Earth's 7.83 Hertz clock speed, the sun's vector of illumination, and the moon's fluid dynamics provide the physical scaffolding of our lived experience.
It's a symphony.
It is. We saw how the canon's library of laws and the Neolattice's winding paths are just two perfectly symmetrical ways of walking the exact same truth.
And finally, we discovered that the universe is saved from the annihilating scream of its own infinite potential by the supernegative, the specific possibilities it actively and sacredly says no to.
If we connect this back to you, the listener, I think it raises a profoundly practical, even urgent question for your own life.
Definitely.
We live in an age of total information overload. You have endless choices, endless feeds, endless possibilities and obligations pressing in on you every single second. The flood of yes is literally drowning us.
So if the universe itself requires the sacred no to prevent a deafening whiteout, what is your personal supernegative?
Right. What are your 34 withheld courts? What is the specific noise, the specific demand on your time, or the specific possibility that you need to actively refuse today? What do you need to lock down in order to make your yes actually mean something?
Because the physics of this framework are totally clear. Without your own boundaries, without your own sovereign no, your potential ceases to be a gift, becomes a flood that drowns your actualized self.
Your architecture, like the arch of the universe, holds only because of the hollow.
Well said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the ALQC source material. It has been a wild, mathematical, and deeply magical ride.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Take that thought with you today as you navigate your own lattice. Conserve your yes, guard your 34 withheld courts, and always remember to listen to the silence between the notes.